Hey, what's up, everybody? Back with another video, and I am in between power outages, and so I am taking advantage of the Wi-Fi at the Zoom down on Kerchadik Street. So I thought I'd do another video while I was out. A lot has happened in the last week, and I wanted to kind of update you guys about some things that are going on, and also do a little bit more of a deep dive into some things that I had previously talked about. So having said that, please, if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Tell me if you like the video, if you don't like the video. Tell me if you'd like me to breach other subjects. If I talk about something and you think you'd like me to go a little bit deeper into it, please let me know about that as well. Just any kind of feedback would really help me kind of steer the channel. And now going into winter, probably I'm going to be spending a lot more time indoors than outdoors, so I'll probably be making more videos. So any input you have will just help me as I grow this channel. So as I reported last week, on the 22nd, President Trump sanctioned Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, and there's been some fallout for that. So part of the counter argument to that I see online from a lot of people are that oh, that's not big of a deal. You know, those sanctions aren't really a big deal. They're not. It's going to take a long time for them to have effect. But as I reported last week, also some of the immediate effects we saw were Reuters is reporting that it is Bloomberg. Bloomberg is reporting that India has quote unquote reduced their purchase of Russian oil to virtually nothing, and that all Chinese state-owned refineries have immediately stopped buying seaborne Russian oil. So that's a pretty big deal. Those are, as far as China goes, those are the state-owned refineries. Now, some of the smaller ones will still probably import Russian oil, although they will most likely have to use Russia's shadow fleet. In order to do that, it will be a significantly reduced amount, and in order for Russia to entice those smaller refineries into buying, they will have to offer even bigger discounts. So it will be a lot less volume of oil Russia's exporting at discounted prices as well. I didn't realize that when President Trump put these sanctions on the 25th, which I believe was the same day that the EU dropped a 19 sanction package also targeting refineries, that on the 16th, the UK had also sanctioned these two oil companies. So the reason I want to bring this up is because I hear a lot of people say, oh, China, China won't care. They'll just sell to Southeast Asian countries. They don't care about the Western sanctions. So let's go ahead and dive into that a little bit. According to official data released and statistical data from energy think tanks that look into this, the trade in 2024, the trade between UK, China, US, China, and EU, China, three of its largest customers, totaled $1.54 trillion. I'm not that great at math, and I can't remember, but I think it's something like the EU was 762 billion, to 585 billion was from the US, and 92 billion was from the UK. In total, it was $1.54 trillion. There is no way that China can make up for those markets, loss of those markets selling to Southeast Asian countries. So the reason the Indian and the Chinese refineries backed off is because they are afraid of secondary sanctions, and as a result of being afraid of those sanctions, China doesn't want to risk losing those markets. Because if they get cut off by U.S. sanctions, they're not going to be allowed to do any trade with those three markets, which you can imagine 1.5 trillion is a pretty substantial amount. As of yesterday, so today is the 29th, as of yesterday, multiple outlets are reporting that Lukoil, one of the largest oil companies in Russia, is selling all of its international assets at reduced prices. So Lukoil wanted to be a global company, so it had bought up refineries. Living in Europe, you might see Lukoil gas stations around. They own an oil field in Iraq. They own quite a few things around the world, because they were trying to diversify and spread out across the world, so they wouldn't be isolated to just being dependent on the Russian economy. And so part of the problem is Lukoil is so afraid of these international secondary sanctions by China that their international assets have pretty much stopped operations in all areas. And we see, according to reading some of the reporting, Bulgaria and oh boy, I just forgot the other place was. It wasn't Azerbaijan. It was Bulgaria, and I'll try to think of it here just a little bit. So there's two countries. There's Bulgaria and another country that has refineries, and these two refineries are at risk of basically being seized and then federalized by the local governments because their economies depend so much on that oil being produced, plus jobs. But they just need for energy security. They need those. So there's a chance that Lukoil might actually lose those refineries, and not just those two. There's some other ones out there as well. And ideally, you would want, Lukoil wants to sell their international assets. They would sell the highest bidder. They're probably not going to have the opportunity because they have completely shut down operations, which means, if they're not operating, they're losing money. So there's probably going to be a fire sale. Governments in these different countries have gotten involved, so they're going to dictate the terms upon which Lukoil is able to sell their assets. And so Lukoil is going to lose a lot of control over these sales. It will probably end up being a fire sale type thing, and they will pretty much have to take whatever they can get. Well, that's bugging me. I cannot remember the name of that other refinery. Anyway, so that's a couple of things I wanted to talk about that are in the news lately. And on the 20, those sanctions were imposed by the U.S. and the EU on the 22nd. On the 25th, the Trump administration did a press release that it has procured. No, I'm trying to think of the word that they use. It had not initiated. It had basically come up with another round of sanctions, specifically targeting Russian banks and technology companies. It had the Trump administration went ahead and notified its EU partners that these sanctions were ready to go. Although right now they're holding off on imposing them, waiting until the 21st of November because that's when the original sanctions that they have levied on the 22nd will come into effect. So it's waiting to see China and India's reaction, waiting to see Russia's reaction. Because as President Trump said when he first levied those tariffs on the 22nd, he was doing an interview. And he said that, I hope they're not going to be on that long. We want them to come to the table. So, this is still something that Trump is trying to use to get Russia to come to the negotiation table. So if they do, and they make some type of deal and end the conflict, then we can imagine these tariffs won't be on that long. However, like I said, the administration has went ahead and basically done another round of sanctions targeting banks and tech companies. Now, it was funny because I actually had to do a little research. I thought all Russian banks were already off the SWIFT system. It turns out they're not, to include two of their largest banks that deal with their oil companies, oil sales, Gazprom Bank and Eurocred, which is a European bank in Russia that handles basically all the European payments, going to Russia, coming from European countries that are buying gas. So wouldn't you think that, Europe would want to shut that bank down quite a while ago? But, here you have Europe, on one hand, is trying to push back against Russia and Ukraine and yelling at the U.S. to be tougher on sanctions, and here they're still buying oil and have their banks open over there. So, I'm not an economist. This is just things I'm picking up online. And so, like I said, I think as we see companies like Lukoil and other companies really back away from the international markets because people who deal with them and their international bodies, or whatever you want to say, affiliates, the international affiliates, they're going to be afraid of secondary sanctions. And so you're going to see a lot less international markets be open to Russia and a lot less people willing to do business with Russian companies, even outside of Russia. And so I think that's really going to start to put the pinch on the Russian economy pretty quickly. One of the other things I wanted to go a little bit deeper dive into, I still see people online saying, send tomahawks now, send tomahawks now. So I want to go a little bit more into this and explain why this is kind of a non sequitur to scream, send tomahawks now. As I said in my previous video, there's no country outside of the U.S. has a ground-based launch platform for tomahawks. And when people immediately go online and they'll Google and see the Typhoon system, and there's the Typhoon in Australia and Japan and Philippines. Yes, those are at U.S. military bases. We have not exported those anywhere. The XMAVs that were produced in conjunction with the producers for Ukraine, they haven't really been exported over here yet. But I wanted to go a little bit more into just that. I will say, I am kind of coming around to, I think the longer Putin delays coming to the negotiation table, the more of a reality I see the Tomahawks being. Although, as I said last time, I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. And I want to kind of to dive into this for people who don't understand how things work. So I will give you an example of the Patriot system. So I've forgotten the MOS, the Motor Service, Army Motor Service, is to be an operator for the Patriot missile system. That is a 13-week school. That is a 13-week school that gets you to the basic operator level, which we call the 10 level. And so I will give you a little bit of comparison. When I very first came in the Army years ago, I was a crew chief on the Apache attack helicopter. My school was 15 weeks long to make me just a 10 level. Do you think they're just going to turn me loose on a multi-million-dollar aircraft and just let me do all the work by myself? And it's not how it works. Every time I did some work, my supervisor had to check off on it, and then we had to get a certified technical inspector to go back and double check that work as well, and actually sign off and stamp off on the work. So the reason all of our systems and platforms we have in the U.S. military work is because we have an entire ecosystem surrounding them of operators, maintainers, and people who have been doing this for decades. So as I said, I was a 10 level crew chief or mechanic on the helicopter. And once you made non-commissioned officer, you're 20 level, you go up to the E6, you're 30 level, and with each different level and each subsequent rank and level, you're expected to have certain different skill sets and basically trust as well. So the whole point of me telling you this is, when there was something that I couldn't do as a 10 level, I could find somebody else that had the 20, 30, 40 level experience. Well, so the problem is, if we run all these people through, let's just say 13, 14, 15 weeks for a 10 level operator on the Tomahawks. Okay, now you've got a bunch of people who are trained at the lowest level of operation. And so to put that into comparison, would you be willing to let somebody who graduated law school, has all the fundamental knowledge, but has never actually been to trial? Are you willing to let them represent you? Same thing with a doctor. You have somebody that's went all through medical school, but they haven't done their clinicals. Are you going to let them operate on you or treat you? No. Is it because you don't think they have the institutional know-how? No. Is it because you think they're a bad person? No. It's because they are below the level that we deem acceptable as society to be functional, at least reliable. There's not that trust issue. And here you look at the Tomahawks. These are long-range weapons that have a half a ton payload on them, and they're extremely accurate. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too. So, like I said, so you have to implement all these systems and train people, and not just train people for basic use. You need to train people that understand, are able to troubleshoot these things on their own. You have to train the maintainers, and then you have to set up the logistical supply line to keep these things up and running, because the things like that require a lot of maintenance. And the other thing is why are the Tomahawks so important? They're not important because they have the longest range or they have the biggest payload. They're important because of their accuracy. And let me give you a little bit of a comparison here. So if you want to fire a Storm Shadow or a French Scalp or even the German Taurus, you would probably either put in a grid coordinate for a building you wanted to destroy, or if you had assets on the ground, they could laze it, and you fire it from a jet, and you could laze it and target it that way. You aim for the building. You put the coordinate for the building. With the Tomahawk, you don't just aim for the building. If there's a window, you can put it through that window if you want. If there is a 4-pane window, you can choose which pane to put it in. These are extremely accurate weapons. Why are they so extremely accurate? Because they have access to classified military GPS satellites, and they use real-time classified intel in order to, during navigation, to pinpoint themselves. These are things that Ukraine does not have access to yet. And and some of the information used by the Tomahawks is at a classification level higher than any agreement we have signed with Ukraine right now. And I've tried to explain this to people online, and if I even get this far in a conversation before they call me a Russian troll, then they just say, well, then just give them, give them the information, give them the intel. So let me explain something to you guys now. The difference between classified secret and classified top secret is, doctrinally speaking, and I'll add a little bit, but secret information is something that if is compromised, it can cause serious damage to the U.S. or its allies. Top secret information, if it's compromised, is something that can cause critical or grave damage to the U.S. and or its allies. And so this is information that we put out there that, we have to worry about if this gets into the wrong hands. Sometimes, because the classification level is not necessarily the information, but it's classified at that level to protect sources and methods. So sometimes we don't want these sources and methods of capabilities we have to get out to enemy hands. And I will go ahead and I'll say the quiet thing out loud. In Ukraine, in the government and the military, they still have people who are working for Russia. Russian sympathizers, maybe somebody in Russia who has family there that they're holding something over their heads, etc. But that does still happen. And so when you think about, somebody just says, well, just go ahead and give them the information. That's because, yes, you're pro-Ukrainian and you're thinking about Ukraine only. But the people making these decisions to release that information have not only possibly 340 million Americans to worry about, they have all their our coalition partners to worry about who also could be affected by this as well. So that is an extremely, extremely, arduous process to put in place. It takes a while. Sharing agreements, you have to have the network set up and stuff. So the whole point of me telling you this, and when you take all this into consideration, what I just said about the Tomahawks, as far as the training, the different levels of training, classification, access to satellites and all this, it is not practical to just say, give them Tomahawks now. It doesn't make sense. And so when you go out and you just screen things like that on the internet, you're not doing anything to help the situation, and you're creating a false expectation for something that's just, like I said, not realistic at this point. So, like I said, I think, even President Trump said the other day, when he said the Tomahawk's a powerful missile, takes 6 months to a year to train. And so, right on the nose. Like I said, if they're going to send these, it's going to take a little while, because they're going to have to train personnel on these and get the systems in country and in place and get logistical supply lines set up and everything like that as well. Anyways, I want to try to give you a little bit of a background. So, all right, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. Maybe go get a cup of coffee or something up here. I'm up in the food court in Soom down on Krachadok Street. It's raining outside. My power's off for another 3 hours. So I thought, what the heck, I might as well come out and do a little bit of a video update. So, like I said, please leave some feedback. Tell me what you guys think. Tell me if you want me to talk about anything else. And as always, thanks for watching. See you soon.